Good afternoon, Jay.
Hello, Phil. How you doing, bud?
Doing well. Doing well. Enjoying this series of lessons. That
Oh
we
yeah,
got.
yeah,
Today we're going to look at Isaac and Rebekah,
yeah.
family favorites. We're in the series family relationships.
Relationships, yeah.
And we're going to look at Isaac and Rebekah. Most of us experience some type of favoritism, either perceived or real.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, we see one child get treated differently in class, and we'll say, "Oh, that's a teacher's pet."
yeah.
It happens sometimes in churches. It happens in families. And we talk about everybody, loving everybody equally. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes there is favoritism, isn't there?
Some people are easier to love than others too, Phil.
It's
That
easy
still
to-
shouldn't be the way. It shouldn't have any impact on whether or not we treat everybody the same.
We got 12 grandkids, and at times each of them is easier to love than the other.
But they're all different.
They all
aren't they?
have their days, and it's easy to show preference for the child that's behaving well and doing good, or a grandchild. And if one shares the same interest as you, I had
Yeah.
a son and he was interested in mechanical things,
Yeah.
and he was always up in the armpit wanting to see what was going on. And but in the family, you favor a child over another, you're asking for it.
Yeah,
It causes dysfunction, and love ought to rule our hearts. In this study today, and we are looking in Genesis 25, and also there's some scripture in Genesis 27. The Lord had renewed his promise of the land and a multitude of descendants after Abram and Lot parted ways. He renewed that with Abram.
right.
And part of that was probably because of his obedience to God, walking out in faith and doing the things that he told him to do. And in turn, God reaffirmed his commitment to Abraham, or Abram. He will be named Abraham in chapter 17, Genesis. But after Abraham turned 100 years old and Sarah 90, Sarah gave birth to the
Finally.
promised son.
Finally had a baby.
Yeah, Isaac. And today we're going to look at Isaac and his mama, Rebekah. Was favoritism okayed by God?
He wants us to love everybody the same, I think.
I wonder, because in the scripture that we have today, after Sarah gave birth, it was noted that Isaac would be served by Ishmael.
Right.
Why would that be? I mean, Ishmael he was the oldest, and he was
He
born
wasn't-
first. They were twins, but said the younger one, or the older one, would serve the younger one.
Now you're
It's
talking
a-
about Jacob and Esau.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
you're
am
talking
getting
about
mixed
Jacob and Esau.
up. But that's where I should have put that question. But
yeah,
it makes you wonder, in this event, we remember that Sarah died, and she
Right.
was buried. Abraham had to show that he trusted God again
yeah,
when he put Isaac on the chopping block.
yeah,
Now, this is his only son.
yeah. Only son by Rebecca. Yeah. Now he had a son by her servant.
Yeah.
Ishmael.
But he done sent them
He
away.
sent him away, and that shows favoritism on God's part, didn't he?
Well,
But
that's
God-
what I say. Was
yeah.
favoritism okayed by God?
Well, God knew who the lineage was going to, Christ's lineage was going to be, and it wasn't through Ishmael's line. It wasn't through a servant's line. It was through Abraham and Sarah. So, in order to protect Isaac, I guess, or make sure that line was what was there, he had Abraham send him away. He still blessed Ishmael. I think Ishmael became a father of a great nation. He had a lot of kinfolks like Ishmael, like Isaac did.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the line that God wanted to bring up Christ through.
Well,
It also tells us in here, Phil, I think that it did. It's not in these scriptures that God told Rebecca, we get these names mixed up, told Rebecca before she had the twins that the second one was going to be the servant of the, or going to be the leader of the first one.
yeah.
The first one was going to serve the second one. The same way with Ishmael and Isaac.
Yeah.
So God,
So when she gave birth to twins, Jacob and Esau,
yeah,
here she takes after the younger one,
yeah.
and Jacob after the older one.
Yeah.
So parental favoritism,
Yeah,
and we're going to see that it winds up being generational favoritism,
mm-hmm.
and this is going to come back and it's going to haunt Jacob later on.
Exactly.
So.
This Abraham's family, he was God's chosen man. He was God's chosen man, but he had a dysfunctional family. You could take his family, his marriage, and his kids' marriages, and you could have a sitcom or a soap opera that went on for years and years and years, like they have even in modern history. You know,
Yeah.
It would go on and on and on of different things that took place during that family's lifetime.
And we talked earlier about how much love and trust could you have between husband and wife if you have multiple wives, multiple little family units within the family.
Yeah.
It was a different culture.
That wouldn't work.
It was a different
Of course,
culture.
God was wanting to populate the world too.
Well, he was going about it in the
Yes,
right way.
yes, he did. He had a lot of kids.
But Isaac's getting older.
Yeah.
To set this up a little bit, he's sent Esau to hunt game and prepare a meal for Isaac before he blessed Esau. Now, receiving the blessing, we'll go into that. And although these verses suggest that Isaac was near death, he might have lived several years after this.
The writer seems to think he lived 38 or 40 years maybe after he said he was about to die. We know he was blind because it's part of the story that we're going to read today about him being almost blind.
And like I said, it's at times, sometimes your children behave in such a way that you might show favoritism. You don't ever want to, but you might approve of their behavior, and in doing that, one perceive that.
Yeah.
Well, that's his favorite. That's Daddy's pet.
Yeah.
That's Mama's pet. He talked about Jerry's a 28-year-old Miami Dolphins fan, and he said he'd been that way since he was 5 years old. And you know what it was about them? Reason that they were his favorites.
He saw it somewhere on
It was their hat. He liked their hat
with a dolphin on it. He liked dolphins.
Yeah. So that's what made favorite. The favorites make us human. We like chocolate or vanilla, Ford or Chevy, Max or regular Microsoft PC. And I guess some ways our favorites define who we are or define our makeup. But in families, favorites devastate. And we'll see how that goes. Let's look at the scripture, Jack.
Let's look at Genesis 25, verses 24 through 28. Now, we're backing up here in time. Some of this we've already talked about, but it's when Rebecca's having her first child, and she's having twins. And she'd already been told she was going to have twins. And in fact, she'd already been told that the second one was born was going to be the leader of the first one, but that's not in these verses. But she's already been told that. But it said when her time came to give birth, there were indeed twins in her womb. The first one came out red looking, covered with hair like a fur coat, and they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out grasping Esau's heel with his hand. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became an expert hunter, an outdoorsman, but Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for wild game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So here's the first hint we see of some trouble brewing in the family. When twins were born, Esau came out. Now Moses wrote this, and he's probably getting this from stories that have been passed down through the years, hundreds of years, even before this was written. But it talks about the fact that Esau was, he says, the writer here, Moses says, red looking, and had a fur coat, or hair like a fur coat. I've seen a lot of babies, but I've never seen one with hair on their arms much. You see it, I had a daughter that had hair all the way down there almost to her eyebrows. But it finally, her grandmother said, Judy, she won't always look like that, will she? And of course she didn't. That hair went away, and she's a pretty young lady today. But anyway, he was hairy, and he was red looking. And then Jacob was the second one born, and he was grasping at Esau's heel when he was born. Heel, in other places in the Old Testament, is symbolic of a trusted friend's deception. You're a heel if you're trying to use deception to deceive someone. Yeah, and he was grabbing hold of Esau's heel when he was born. When Jacob was born. It says he was a quiet man. I think is what it says. No, it doesn't say that. Yeah. Later on it does. It says he was. Yeah, it did say he was quiet. When he was a quiet man, and when you look at the definition of the word quiet, it can mean several things. It could mean, see if I can find them here, complete, or perfect, or having integrity, or wholesome, or ordinary, or sound, or plain, or upright. But we're going to see in Jacob's life after this, he didn't always live up to all those traits, did he? He was actually a cheater and a schemer at different times in his life.
The deceiver fit him.
The deceiver fit him. He came out that the deceiver fit him. The boys grew up. Now, we don't know how many years that was, except that boys in the Bible can mean a baby, it can mean a teenager, young child, or it can even mean a young adult. There's a long stretch of I've read where it's over 20-year period of time is what it could be.
Well, you think now after we go through this, he sends Isaac sends Jacob away to find a wife.
Right.
So you got to think that they're marrying age when all this transpires.
And it gives you a hint here too, because it already tells what their jobs are. Esau's an expert hunter. His vocation is being out in the open hunting and probably taking care of herds and things like that. Where Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. So that's and Phil, we haven't talked about this yet, but you could have 10 kids and they'll all be different.
Oh yeah,
they're not alike. You can see if it's sometimes it's just a little subtle difference, but they're all different.
Yeah.
And here we see these two who couldn't have been much more opposite than what they were. One of them lived outdoors. One of them stayed at home with Mama, with Rebekah. And what the parents did, it's okay to. You can't help sometimes, as you said on numerous occasions tonight already, you can't help but love one of them at certain times in their life more because of the things they're doing, the way they're acting, but you don't ever show it.
Yeah.
And you have to fight hard to do that, but there wasn't any question that Isaac loved Esau, and Jacob and Rebekah loved Jacob, and they did not hide it at all. And that's going to cause lots of problems throughout the years as they grow up and continue to start raising their families.
Yeah.
I'm sure they had big fights. I'm sure those, during that growing up years, that those boys butted heads all the time because of their differences. But love with partiality changes things. It doesn't work. And we're going to see that, next we're going to see that deception, when you bring deception into that situation, it really causes problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things Judy and I always try to do, even with our own, we just had 2 daughters, but with those two, you try not to treat them different. And the same with the grandkids. And it's not easy.
Now, Jacob, he goes into this deceit, and he's going to learn eventually that we prevail with God by yielding to him.
Right.
But it just seems like you had to beat it into him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he gets caught up in several different things over the years.
You're right.
In Genesis, let's see, I'm in the right place.
Yeah. 27:5.
Yeah, okay, 27:5-10 says, now Rebekah was listening to what Isaac said to his son Esau. So while Esau went to the field to hunt some game to bring in, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, listen, I heard your father talking with your brother Esau. He said, bring me some game. Make a delicious meal for me to eat so that I can bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now, my son, listen to me and do what I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, and I'll make them into a delicious meal for your father, the kind he loves. Then take it to your father to eat so that he may bless you before he dies. So well, they thought he was going to die.
They thought he was close, didn't they?
Yeah, they thought he was going to die. But Rebekah, she's eavesdropping.
Yeah.
Now that shows poor behavior, doesn't it? That's a bad example to give your kids, is to eavesdrop on mama or eavesdrop on daddy.
Now her mother-in-law was caught eavesdropping. Remember the time that God told Abraham that you're still going to have that son, you're still going to have a great nation come from you, and Sarah was standing outside the door.
Outside the tent, yeah.
And said, ha!
Yeah.
And started laughing, and God called her on it, called her
Yeah.
on the carpet and said, what are you doing laughing?
Well, like most people that are doing something wrong, Rebekah tried to pull her son into it.
Yes, she did. She
And-
wanted to help.
and she-
She
She sought to pull him into this plan.
yeah.
So she heard the conversation, and she identified Esau as Isaac's son and describes Jacob
That's her son.
as her son.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
that's favoritism right there. But it becomes pretty evident that Rebekah had the favorite in Isaac, or in Jacob, rather. And not only that, but she took action.
Yeah.
Now, JR, was it a sin for her to think, I wish he would get that blessing, or I wish he would get that,
Not until she acted.
till she acted?
Not until she acted.
Yeah,
It-
sin
I mean,
is born.
Yeah.
Sin is born when she took action,
mhm.
and to ensure that Jacob received the blessing of the firstborn. So with Esau away hunting game, Rebekah took to getting him in there and getting him that blessing before he got back. Whole thing is, like you said, it's messed up.
Now, we also know that Isaac had been the one to send Esau out. He said, "You go out and kill me some good game. Come in and cook it for me, and I'm going to bless you." Remember, he said, "I'm going to
Yeah.
bless you." So
Yeah.
she thought this was the time that Isaac's about to die. This time he's going to put his big blessing out, and whoever he blesses will be the one that gets that blessing. And she wanted to make sure that Jacob got it instead of his son Esau.
Yeah. And then um, the conversation there with Abram when he was with those heavenly visitors,
Yeah.
that was a little eavesdropping too. wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
But she emphasized the need for Jacob to follow her instructions.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't leave any doubt.
Mhm.
Listen to me, do what I tell
Do
you.
what I tell you.
Now, when Mama says that, Phil
Yeah.
did what Mama said.
Yeah.
Listen, when you remember that little old video that went around here a couple years ago. Listen, Linda, the little video guy on there, and he was trying to explain things away to his mama. But he says, listen, behold, look, it demands your attention. Now, on this blessing business,
Yeah. Yeah.
that usually had something to do with a person's prosperity, their status in the neighborhood, their success,
Yeah.
longevity, fruitfulness. The person that got the blessing was typically the one who got they were looked upon as the next patriarch.
Had the heir to.
Yeah, the heir. And that was part of it. They got a double blessing
double.
of the estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because Esau had emerged from the womb, but first
Yeah.
he was thought to be, or was regarded as the elder son,
Yeah.
and it was thought that he would be the one to get the blessing. So now it's closely linked with the birthright, but now the birthright already belongs to Jacob.
Yeah.
As you remember, he came in famished from hunting.
Yeah. Yes.
And Jacob said,
He said, "Give me some food."
I'll fix you a great meal if you'll sell me your birthright. And he thought, boy, I'm going to die if I don't get me something to eat. So he sells him his birthright.
Yeah.
So now he's going after the rest of it. He's going after the blessing.
Yep. I can just see Esau. Of course, he probably wasn't near death, but we pick our grandkids up. I'm starving to death.
Yeah.
I can't wait. We can't drive another mile. I got to have something to eat, and
But-
it's not quite that bad.
But back in Deuteronomy 21 verses 15 through 17, it talks about how you are to hand out the blessings and birthright.
Mhm.
And you couldn't skip the oldest one and go to the next one.
Mhm.
So you couldn't give that birthright to someone other than the firstborn son. But now you could sell it. You got in a pinch. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the birthright blessings included 4 elements: prosperity, agricultural prosperity, acclaim and success, mastery over the clan, the rest of the family, and a protective provision from God was thought also to come with that.
Mhm.
So, and then they added in there, Rebecca did, in the Lord's presence.
Mhm.
Now, that kind of just put a stamp of approval on everything.
But the Lord didn't have anything to do with it. But
didn't.
she brought it in, didn't she?
Rebecca was playing the role of a scheming helicopter. She was, she listened in on that conversation. She had a shadow mission developed in her heart, and she was going after it, and she was going to thwart the blessing from her poor old husband, who was too blind to see if it was Esau or Jacob, which one it was. And she was just like a puppeteer, pulling the strings, working things along, getting it the way she wanted it. She participated, controlled. It was a sham. But, it also shamed Jacob.
Yeah.
It told him that he wasn't good enough to receive his dad's blessing.
Right.
We're going to have to trick him out of it.
Yeah.
If they hadn't done this, would Jacob have gotten the blessing?
It was God's plan, right?
That was God's plan. Would he
He would
have
have gotten
gotten
it
it?
without, he could have gotten it without the deception.
We don't know how that would have occurred, but you would think that
Yeah.
that was be what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, instead she has a behavior there that tells Jacob that he wasn't good enough, and deception was the way to go about getting this thing done. And that's going to prove counterproductive in Jacob's life. It doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
Why is honesty so important in family relationships?
If you can't trust your family, well, the old saying is you can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to trust your family that they have your best interests in heart and you have their best interests in heart. You don't want to teach your children to be deceptive.
No. And you think what effect does favoritism and deception have in shaping Jacob's character?
Yeah.
We know, we're going to see, we'll study next week. This haunts Jacob from now
Yeah. Yeah.
with his own family and with his dealings with Laban. He gets deceived. He gets a little bit of
Yeah. He gets some
his own
payback
medicine.
early on, doesn't he?
in these next verses, we see that encouraging others to sin is out of place in any family.
And Phil, the writer in your section there brings up the fact that he believes that Isaac was probably 137 when this happened, and he lived to be about 180, and that Esau and Jacob were probably 77 when this happened. I always thought that they were probably in their 20s, early 20s, just starting out.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
But that's not what this says. It says that,
We know that Isaac was old.
yeah.
We know that.
Well, he was 60 when the boys were born.
Yeah.
It told us that, and it said they might have been as much as 77. I didn't.
I don't know how they get that.
Well, because it's Bible scholars have said that possibly Isaac was 137 when this occurred, and that they were 60 when he was born. So that means they were 77 then.
But they were talking about going back and comparing the ages of
Some of
Jacob
Joseph's.
and Joseph
Right.
years later,
Right.
which occurred years later, and that's how they were trying to ascertain
Yeah.
the ages.
I never thought of them being anywhere near that old.
I'd never heard of it that way,
Yeah. Yeah.
but this writer of the study here speculates he lived another 20 years after bestowing that blessing on Jacob.
Yeah. So Rebecca started the process of Jacob getting the blessing. Esau's still out hunting.
Mm-hmm.
She sends Jacob to go fetch her a couple of goats, and she's gonna fix them up and make that meal, and trick poor blind Isaac into thinking it's Esau instead of Jacob. So we look at verses 11 through 13 of chapter 27. This is now Jacob has just heard from Rebekah, said, go out there and get those goats. And Jacob answered Rebekah, his mother, look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, but I am a man with smooth skin. Suppose my father touches me, then I will be revealed to him as a deceiver and bring a curse rather than a blessing on myself. His mother said to him, your curse be on me, my son. Just obey me and go get them for me. Jacob's kind of trying to talk her out of it, isn't he? Trying to back up and say, no, this might not work as well as you think it's going to. My dad might not be he might be sharper than you think. And he says, because Esau's a hairy man, we see that once again, that was brought out in their very first verses about their birth.
You know, this whole thing right here, it's typical of today in that we think God's not listening or he's not watching.
You're right.
He doesn't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
He's talking to her as if God wasn't even there.
Yeah.
It'd be like me and you and Judy sitting there talking about Judy
Yeah.
like she wasn't even
It
here.
wasn't even sitting there. Yeah.
She's going to pick up on it.
It was not going to be long.
And you know, it's the same way with Jacob and Rebekah
Yeah.
here. whether he reveals it or not, or whether he believes it or not, that
Yeah.
that he's going to be the deceiver. He's the deceiver in all this.
Yeah. Well, Isaac, it tells us in verse 1 of this same chapter that Isaac's eyes were so weak that he could not see. He was probably almost blind. Now, so Rebecca says, don't worry about it, and says, if it happens and we're caught in this scheme, the curse will be on me and not on you. Just go, baby, and do what I tell you to do. Now, as it turns out, Phil, the rest of the story is that Jacob was concerned about Isaac touching him, but she made sure that when that happened, that he would feel a hairy arm. She took the skin from the hide from the goats and put it on Jacob's arm, on his arms. Not only did she do that, as it turns out, she got the meal fixed. She fixed the meal she knew he would love. She had him wear Esau's garments, and I'm assuming that Esau's garments were a lot dirtier and more smelled different than Jacob's did. She had him smell like Esau. She gave him some wine to drink. Jacob gave him some wine to drink so it would dull his senses.
Uh-huh.
And Jacob had Isaac seriously questioned. He thought something was up.
Yeah.
But all of his senses was telling him it wasn't. But he was telling him something was telling him that this is not right. But Esau repeatedly declared that he was Isaac.
So she does 5 different things.
Does 5 things
to throw him off.
Smooth skin.
Him blind.
Yeah.
And laying there in the bed.
Yeah.
And she does 5 different things to make sure it's not found out.
And the last one is that Jacob repeatedly lied that and said, no, I'm Esau. Why aren't you going? You need to give me the blessing. And he finally does. Jacob didn't want to be seen as a deceiver by Isaac, but yet with his mother's pushing and prodding, he went on and did exactly what she wanted him to do. But he didn't want to get a curse either. And the curses, as they talk about, was an absence of or reversal of blessing or rightful state.
Yeah, it's not like a spell or something.
No, it wasn't like you're going to turn into a
witch,
frog
yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, it was something that caused you to have bad luck throughout your life or something like that. But the writer makes one statement here. It says Isaac's blessing of Jacob was not irrevocable because it had already been spoken. Isaac could have taken it back, according to what the writer says and the Bible says in other places. But we know it was ordained by the Lord.
Yeah.
That's the
That's
hard part to understand about this.
Makes you stand and wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah. That God ordained this blessing all along, but I think he had other way of doing it other than using deception.
And that's the way it usually happens.
Yeah.
Somebody get in trouble.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
you know, look at society today. You have a woman that gets beat by her husband, rather than praying to God about getting taken care of or something. She takes out her pistol and she shoots him.
Yeah.
And then everything, her world falls apart. So often those things happen. I mean, they happen every day. You hear them every day.
Yeah. And you made a statement a while ago that's so true. Jacob was a deceiver here, and he got the blessing, but it haunted Jacob the rest of his life.
Well, God knows.
Yeah.
And it's just like Adam and Eve in the garden. He knew what they'd done. He asked them, what is it you've done?
Yeah.
Abram and Sarah.
Yeah.
Cain slew Abel. You know, God knew what they'd done.
And in it,
looks like he learned.
yeah. And in this case, Rebecca did get the curse, because the writer says that there's no indication ever. Once this was found out, and it got found out shortly, because here comes Esau in with the game and says, I'm ready I'll fix your meal and get you a blessing. I've already blessed you. No, you haven't. It must have been Jacob. And Esau gets mad, of course, which we know he would. And I don't know if he ever said he was going to kill Jacob.
He said he's going to kill him.
Well, and I'm sure Jacob thought he was.
Uh-huh.
So they send Jacob away to get away from Esau. And Esau stays there. Jacob goes to his uncle's house, Laban,
Yeah.
and decides he wants to marry one of Laban's daughters. He likes Rachel's one he wanted to marry, and what Laban said, work for me 7 years, you can have her.
Yeah.
He worked 7 years. That night of the wedding is supposed to take place. Laban sends in his other daughter, Leah. His oldest daughter, Leah, says she has to be married first.
Don't ever trust that veil.
He pulled the veil up and it was the wrong woman.
Never trust that veil.
So he had to work another 7 years to get Rachel. And of course he finally married, but brought both of them back with his, where he was born. As it turns out, there's reconciliation there, there's redemption. Esau made up with Jacob. And of course we know that
Yeah,
Jacob.
we'll look at that next week.
Is that next week?
Yeah, he said, let's see, they had,
Yeah.
and Laban's,
Yes. Next week.
Leah had 10 sons, and then he has 2 with Rachel. So I guess he'd slowed down a lot by the time he got down there to Rachel.
No wonder Jacob filled the world with people. He was having kids right.
Well, he was.
He was having kids right and left.
But you know, that deception thing
Yeah.
always haunted him.
And it haunted
He'd
him.
always come back, and
Yeah.
you know, he would use that, and he too would try to pass Rachel off somewhere
Yes.
as his sister,
As his
rather
sister.
than his wife.
Right.
And you know, we know he paid for that.
Yeah. Now, the way Rebecca paid for it is, once Jacob was sent away, that was her favorite son. They don't think
She
she
didn't
ever
see him.
saw him again.
The scripture doesn't say where she ever did.
Right. But she stayed there and died and was buried there, where Sarah was buried, where Abraham was buried, and we don't think she ever saw him again.
Yeah.
Interesting thing too, Phil. We talk about how they were dysfunctional, how they were deceptive, and so forth. But in the end, Abraham was a great follower of God, and his name was changed to Abraham because of that fact. Same thing with Jacob. Jacob's name was initially, finally changed to Israel, and I forgot. It said it means.
Isn't that the father of many nations?
I don't remember exactly what I saw. I thought it was in here somewhere. But his name was changed to Israel because he had followed Christ, followed God, and done what God wanted him to do. And he finally realized that the way to have God's favor was to do what God wanted him to do. And he became a great man of God like Abraham had been. Of course, we know, like you said, all the kids he had. We're going to talk about that next week. So the point of this lesson is love should be without favoritism within the family. We cannot show favoritism or be deceptive with our children.
Just
our
think.
grandchildren.
Just think if Rebecca had been the faithful example that God wants her to be. Think of how different his life might have been.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, maybe that's why he was routed to do the things he did. But we know at some point Jacob wrestles with God.
Yeah, that's what it's, yeah.
And he touched his hip and he came out crippled.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we do with this lesson, JR?
Yeah,
We look at deception. We remind ourselves that, it's never right to show favorites or to attempt to deceive God, or deceive others in the family in order to try to get what you want.
God knows it before,
He
he
knows
knows it
it
when we
before
think
we-
it. When we start, before we even start the act, he knows what we're gonna do. So we're not gonna hide it from him.
if you look at yourself and look inward and you see that you've had some type of sin like that, and it's maybe worked on your relationships, maybe you need to seek to rectify whether it's favoritism or deceit in your relationship with that family member, and maybe ask forgiveness if it's due. So anything you get through favoritism or deceit is not going to be profitable to you.
No, you're gonna,
So-
probably gonna reap some consequences from it.
Yeah. In this day and time, it's hard to deceive anybody.
Yeah.
But that's not the only reason that we don't do it. We just don't do it because it's wrong.
Right.
Next week, we are going to look at,
I guess we're gonna look at when Jacob
we're going to look
Esau
at
are-
Jacob and Esau.
when they are reunited.
This is a family rivalry, you know,
Yeah.
they separate from each other, and we'll look at that little family squabble.
See if they make it out all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank y'all for joining us. Hope you can be back with us next week.
Yep.